The bitter wind howled across the open plains of Colorado Territory, carrying with it the promise of a harsh winter that had come too soon. Abigail Frost clutched her threadbare dress to her trembling body as she staggered through the growing darkness, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air of October 1868. She had lost everything: her money, her luggage, even her coat, all stolen while she dozed briefly at the last stagecoach stop. Now, miles from her destination, and with night falling fast, Abigail feared she wouldn't survive until morning. The first snowflakes began to fall as the temperature plummeted further. Her fingers had gone numb, and she could no longer feel her toes inside her thin shoes. The road ahead seemed endless, stretching toward the silhouette of mountains she knew she'd never reach. As darkness enveloped the landscape, Abigail's steps faltered. Her knees buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto the cold, hard ground. This was it, she thought. This was how she would die, alone in a strange territory, frozen to death before she even had a chance to begin her new life. Tears streamed down her cheeks, instantly cooling against her skin. Then, through the wind's mournful cry, came the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. "Madam. Madam, are you all right?" A deep voice broke through her fading consciousness. Abigail lifted her head weakly, barely making out the figure of a man astride a horse. He dismounted quickly, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. In the dim moonlight that occasionally broke through the clouds, she could see he wore a wide-brimmed hat and a heavy sheepskin coat. A cowboy. I'm so cold," she managed through chattering teeth. Without hesitation, the man unfolded the thick woolen blanket tied behind his saddle. "Here," he said, wrapping it securely around her shoulders. The sudden warmth was so overwhelming that fresh tears sprang to Abigail's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Can't leave a lady freezing out here," he replied, his voice gentle despite its roughness. "Name's Russell Reed. Most folks just call me Russ." "Abigail Frost," she replied, her voice weak. "Well, Miss Frost, seems to me you picked the wrong night to be out for a stroll," he said, the hint of a smile in his voice despite the seriousness of the situation. "My ranch is about 3 miles from here. Can you ride?" Abigail nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. She had ridden horses before, but never in such a condition. Russell helped her to her feet, keeping the blanket wrapped tightly around her. She swayed dangerously, and he steadied her with strong hands. "You're in no condition to ride alone," he observed. With surprising ease, he lifted her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. One arm wrapped securely around her waist while the other held the reins. "Hang on now." The warmth of his body against her back provided additional shelter from the biting wind. Abigail leaned back against his chest, too exhausted and cold to worry about propriety. As they rode through the gathering snowfall, she drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of his deep voice occasionally speaking reassurances to her or commands to his horse. When they finally reached the ranch, Abigail was barely conscious. Through half-closed eyes, she made out the shape of a sturdy log house with light glowing from its windows. Russell dismounted and lifted her from the horse as if she weighed nothing. "Martha," he called as he carried Abigail across the porch. "Martha, we need help." The door swung open and a stout woman with gray-streaked hair appeared. Her eyes widened at the sight of the half-frozen woman in Russell's arms. "Lord have mercy." Bring her in, Martha exclaimed, stepping aside. The warmth of the house hit Abigail like a physical force. A fire roared in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the wooden walls. Russell set her down gently in a chair close to the flames. "Found her collapsed on the road to town," he explained to Martha. "She's freezing." "Poor dear," Martha clucked sympathetically. She needs dry clothes and something hot to drink. I'll heat some broth." As Martha bustled away, Russell knelt before Abigail, his dark eyes filled with concern. Now, in the light of the fire, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent in the sun and wind. His hair was dark brown, almost black, and he wore a neatly trimmed beard that did little to hide his strong jawline. "You're safe now," he assured her, his voice deep and steady. "Martha's my housekeeper. She'll take good care of you." "Thank you," Abigail whispered again, still clutching his blanket around her shoulders. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." A shadow crossed Russell's face. "Best not to think about that. What were you doing out there alone, if you don't mind my asking?" Before Abigail could answer, Martha returned with a steaming mug of broth and a bundle of clothing. "Drink this," the housekeeper ordered, pressing the mug into Abigail's trembling hands. "Then we'll get you into something dry. These are my daughter's clothes. She's about your size." The broth was simple but delicious, warming Abigail from the inside out. As she sipped, Russell excused himself to tend to his horse. Martha helped her change behind a screen in the corner of the room. The borrowed dress was plain but clean and, most importantly, dry and warm. When Russell returned, stomping snow from his boots, Abigail was seated by the fire again, color slowly returning to her cheeks. "You're looking better already," he observed, hanging his coat by the door. "Thanks to you and Martha," Abigail replied. The housekeeper smiled and disappeared into the kitchen, giving them privacy. "Now, if you're feeling up to it, I'd like to know how you ended up in such a predicament," Russell said, settling into a chair opposite her. Abigail took a deep breath. "I was traveling to Silverdale to take a position as a schoolteacher. The stage stopped at Preston's Creek for a meal, and I must have dozed off. When I woke, my valise was gone with all my money and my coat inside." She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears of frustration. "The stagecoach had already left. I started walking, thinking Silverdale couldn't be far, but—" "Silverdale's another 15 miles, Russell informed her with a frown. "You would never have made it, especially not in this weather." "I realize that now," Abigail admitted. "I've never felt so foolish." "Not foolish," Russell corrected. "Just unfortunate. Thieves prey on travelers all the time in these parts." Abigail nodded gratefully at his attempt to spare her pride. "In any case, I'm deeply indebted to you, Mr. Reed." "Russ," he insisted, "and there's no debt." "I couldn't very well leave you to freeze." Martha returned with a plate of food, venison stew and cornbread, and insisted Abigail eat. The simple meal tasted better than anything she could remember. As she ate, Russell told her about his ranch, Elkhorn, which he had built from nothing over the past 8 years. He raised cattle primarily but kept some horses as well. "It's not much," he said with a hint of pride, "but it's mine." After dinner, Martha showed Abigail to a small but comfortable bedroom. "You rest now, dear. Things will look brighter in the morning." Exhausted from her ordeal, Abigail fell asleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow. She dreamed of swirling snow and strong arms carrying her to safety. The morning dawned clear and cold, the world outside transformed by a pristine blanket of snow. Abigail woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she was disoriented, but then the events of the previous night came flooding back. She dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes and made her way to the kitchen. Martha was at the stove flipping pancakes on a cast iron griddle. "Good morning, dear. Sleep well." "Better than I have in weeks," Abigail admitted. "Is Mr. Reed Russ around?" "He's out checking on the livestock." "Early riser, that one. Always has been." Martha set a plate of food in front of Abigail. "Eat up. You need your strength." As Abigail ate, she gazed out the window at the snow-covered ranch. It was larger than she had realized in the darkness. Besides the main house, there was a barn, a corral, and several outbuildings. In the distance, she could see rolling hills dotted with cattle and pine trees. "It's beautiful here," she murmured. "That it is," Martha agreed. "Though it can be harsh too, winters out here test a person's mettle." The door opened and Russell entered, bringing with him a gust of cold air. He removed his hat and coat, hanging them on pegs by the door. Snow dusted his hair and shoulders. "Good morning, Miss Frost," he greeted her. "Feeling better today?" "Much better, thank you. And please call me Abigail." Russell smiled, and Abigail was struck by how it transformed his face, softening the hard lines carved by years in the elements. "Abigail it is." Over breakfast, they discussed her situation. The snow had blocked the pass to Silverdale, and it would be at least a week before the stage could get through. "You're welcome to stay here until then," Russell offered. "I can take you to town as soon as the road is clear." "I couldn't impose," Abigail protested weakly, though she had no alternative. "It's no imposition," Martha assured her. "Could use another woman's company around here. Gets lonely with just the two of us and the ranch hands." "Besides," Russell added, "I'm heading into town today to report the theft of your belongings to Sheriff Davis. Might be able to find out if anyone saw anything." Gratitude welled up in Abigail's chest. "You're both very kind." After breakfast, Russell saddled his horse for the ride to town. Before leaving, he came to speak with Abigail. "Is there anything you need from town? Martha's clothes fit well enough, but you might want some things of your own." "I have no money," Abigail reminded him, embarrassed. Russell waved away her concern. "Consider it an advance on your teaching salary. I'm on the school board in Silverdale. We've been waiting for you to arrive. The children have been without proper schooling for months." Surprised by this connection, Abigail gave him a list of necessities. As he mounted his horse, she called out, "Be careful." He tipped his hat to her with a smile. "Always am, schoolteacher." With Russell gone, Martha put Abigail to work helping with household chores. Despite her sheltered upbringing in Boston, Abigail was no stranger to hard work and welcomed the activity. As they worked, Martha shared stories about Russell and the ranch. "He came out here with nothing but determination and grit," the older woman told her. "His pa died in the war, left the family destitute. Russ headed west, worked as a cowhand until he saved enough to buy this land. Built everything you see with his own two hands. He seems like a good man," Abigail observed, trying to sound casual. Martha gave her a knowing look. "One of the best. Too stubborn for his own good sometimes, and too proud to admit when he needs help. But a good man through and through." By the time Russell returned that afternoon, Abigail had helped Martha prepare a hearty stew and fresh bread. He entered stamping snow from his boots, his arms laden with packages. "Sheriff Davis is asking around about your stolen property," he reported, setting down his burdens. "But I wouldn't get my hopes up. Likely whoever took it is long gone." Abigail nodded, having already resigned herself to this probability. "Thank you for trying." "I brought you these," Russell said, indicating the packages. "Some clothes, a coat, boots, things you might need." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Abigail examined the items. The clothes were simple but of good quality: 2 dresses, undergarments, a warm shawl, sturdy boots, and a heavy woolen coat. There were also personal items: a hairbrush, soap, and even a small bottle of lavender water. "This is too much," she protested, calculating the cost in her head. "Nonsense," Russell replied firmly. "Consider it the town's welcome to our new schoolteacher. I spoke with Mayor Thompson while I was there. He was relieved to hear you're safe and asked me to convey the town's apologies for your rough welcome to Colorado." That evening, after dinner, Russell showed Abigail his small library, a bookshelf in the corner of the main room filled with an eclectic collection of volumes. Her eyes lit up at the sight. "You're welcome to borrow anything that catches your interest," he offered, noting her enthusiasm. "Thank you," she said, running her fingers along the spines. "I've always found comfort in books." "As have I," Russell admitted. "Not much time for reading these days, but in winter when the work slows, I try to catch up." Abigail selected a volume of poetry and settled by the fire. Russell took a seat across from her with a book of his own, and they read in companionable silence, interrupted only by the crackling of the flames and the occasional comment about something one of them had read. It was the most peaceful evening Abigail had experienced in a long time. Growing up in a household where her father's volatile temper had kept everyone walking on eggshells, and then living as a governess in homes where she was neither family nor servant, she had rarely known such tranquility. As the days passed, Abigail fell into a routine at Elkhorn Ranch. She helped Martha with the cooking and cleaning, learned to feed the chickens and collect eggs, and even tried her hand at milking the cow with limited success that left Russell chuckling at her efforts. "It takes practice," he assured her after rescuing her from a particularly uncooperative bovine. "Took me weeks to get the hang of it when I first started ranching. The forced idleness of being snowbound might have been tedious, but Abigail found herself enjoying each day." Russell taught her to play chess in the evenings, and she discovered she had quite a talent for the game, beating him as often as he beat her. "You're a natural strategist," he commented after she checkmated him one night. "Ever thought of running your own school instead of just teaching in someone else's?" The question caught her off guard. "I haven't the resources for such an endeavor." "But if you did," Abigail considered it seriously, "I suppose I would. I've always had ideas about how children learn best, approaches that differ from the traditional methods." Russell nodded thoughtfully. "Silverdale could use fresh ideas. Our last teacher was set in his ways, believed learning was a matter of memorization and discipline, nothing more." "There's certainly a place for both," Abigail agreed, "but children need more. They need to understand why they're learning something, not just what they're learning." As they talked, Russell's respect for her intelligence and passion grew visibly. Abigail found herself sharing dreams and ambitions she had scarcely acknowledged even to herself. A week passed, and then another. The snow showed no signs of melting. In fact, more fell every few days, keeping the pass to Silverdale firmly closed. December arrived, bringing with it preparations for Christmas. Martha enlisted Abigail's help in decorating the house with pine boughs and red berries. They baked cookies and pies, filling the house with delicious aromas. Russell returned from hunting trips with game for the table, and the ranch hands who lived in a bunkhouse near the barn often joined them for dinner, bringing lively conversation and news from the distant parts of the property. One evening, as Abigail helped Russell mend a bridle by the fire, he asked, "Do you miss your family? Being away from them at Christmas must be difficult." Abigail's hands stilled. "My parents are both gone. I have no siblings. The last few Christmases I spent with my employers' families, but I was never truly part of their celebrations." Russell's expression softened with understanding. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." "You weren't," she assured him. "What about you? Do you have family elsewhere?" "My mother and sister live in St. Louis. I send them money when I can, but I haven't seen them in years." A shadow of regret crossed his face. "The ranch demands all my attention." "Perhaps someday they could visit you here," Abigail suggested. "See what you've built." "Perhaps." But he didn't sound convinced. As Christmas approached, Abigail noticed Russell disappearing into the barn for hours at a time when he wasn't working with the cattle or horses. When she asked Martha about it, the housekeeper merely smiled mysteriously and said, "That man's always up to something." On Christmas Eve, they gathered for a special dinner. The ranch hands had decorated the bunkhouse with their own touch of festivity and were having their celebration there, leaving the main house to Russell, Martha, and Abigail. The table was laden with roast venison, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the root cellar. Martha had outdone herself with pies for dessert, apple and pumpkin. They ate until they couldn't manage another bite, then gathered by the fire to exchange small gifts. Martha received a new shawl from Russell and a hand-embroidered handkerchief from Abigail. Abigail had used scraps of fabric Martha had given her, working on the project in secret during quiet afternoons. For Martha's gift to Abigail, the housekeeper had knitted a pair of warm mittens. "To keep those delicate hands of yours protected," she said with affection. Russell gave Martha a carved wooden box for her sewing notions, which he had made himself. When it came time for Russell and Abigail to exchange gifts, they both seemed suddenly shy. "Ladies first," Martha prompted, her eyes twinkling. Abigail handed Russell a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Inside was a leather-bound journal. "I noticed you keep records of the ranch in those loose papers in your desk drawer," she explained. "I thought this might be more practical." Russell ran his hand over the smooth leather, clearly touched by her thoughtfulness. "It's perfect, thank you." Then he stood and asked Abigail to close her eyes. "Your gift is too large to wrap," he explained. She obeyed, curious. She heard him leave the room and return moments later. "You can look now," he said, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Abigail opened her eyes and gasped. Russell stood holding a beautiful wooden rocking chair, polished to a warm honey glow. "You made this?" she asked, rising to examine it more closely. He nodded. "I noticed you like to read in the evenings. Thought you might be more comfortable in this than those hard chairs by the fire." "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "No one has ever given me something so thoughtful." Martha, watching their exchange with a satisfied smile, announced she was turning in for the night. "These old bones need rest. Don't stay up too late, you two." After she left, Russell placed the rocking chair near the fire and gestured for Abigail to try it. She sat down, finding it fit her perfectly. "How did you know the right dimensions?" she wondered. Russell looked slightly embarrassed. "I may have taken some measurements while you were sleeping in that chair one afternoon last week." The thought of him watching over her as she slept made Abigail's heart beat faster. She rocked gently, admiring the craftsmanship. "You have a remarkable talent, Russ." He sat in his usual chair across from her, the firelight playing across his features. "My father was a carpenter before the war. He taught me the basics when I was a boy." "He would be proud of what you've accomplished," Abigail said softly. Russell's expression grew distant. "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice coming out here, leaving my mother and sister behind." "You've built something remarkable," Abigail told him earnestly. "Not just the ranch, but a life. A good life." Their eyes met across the space between them, and something shifted in the air. Russell leaned forward slightly. "It's been a better life since you arrived, Abigail." The simple declaration made her breath catch. Before she could respond, a gust of wind rattled the windows, breaking the moment. Russell cleared his throat. More snow coming by the sound of it. "I should check on the animals before turning in." He left, and Abigail remained by the fire, her thoughts in turmoil. She had come to Colorado to be a schoolteacher, to build an independent life for herself. She hadn't expected to find herself developing feelings for a rancher who had saved her from freezing to death. And yet, as she rocked in the chair he had made with his own hands, she couldn't deny the warmth that filled her whenever he was near. Christmas Day dawned bright and clear. After breakfast, Russell surprised Abigail by suggesting they go for a sleigh ride. "The snow's perfect for it," he explained, "and you haven't seen much of the ranch yet." Bundled in her new coat and Martha's mittens, Abigail climbed into the sleigh beside Russell. He tucked a thick fur robe around their legs, and with a flick of the reins they were off. The landscape was breathtaking. Fresh snow blanketed everything in pristine white, sparkling in the sunlight. Pine trees heavy with snow lined the edges of meadows where cattle gathered in sheltered spots. The sleigh glided smoothly, the only sounds the jingling of the harness bells and the soft shush of runners on snow. "It's like a fairyland," Abigail marveled, her eyes wide with wonder. Russell smiled at her enthusiasm. "Wait until you see the view from Eagle Ridge." He guided the sleigh along a winding trail that climbed gradually upward. When they reached the top of the ridge, he reined the horse to a stop. Below them stretched the entire valley, the ranch buildings looking like toys in the distance. Beyond, the mountains rose majestically, their peaks glistening. "Oh, Russ," Abigail breathed, "it's magnificent. This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," he admitted. "Whenever I need to think or make a difficult decision, I come here." "I can see why. It puts everything in perspective, doesn't it? Makes human concerns seem small by comparison." He nodded, studying her face as she gazed at the view. "Not all human concerns," he said softly. Abigail turned to find him looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Russell reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small package. "I have one more gift for you." Surprised, Abigail unwrapped it to find a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a snowflake. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It reminded me of the night we met," Russell explained. "I saw it in the general store months ago and bought it on impulse. Didn't know why at the time." "And now?" Abigail asked, hardly daring to breathe. Russell's hand covered hers. "Now I think I was waiting for you." The simplicity of his declaration moved her deeply. Without thinking, Abigail leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. For an instant, Russell seemed surprised, but then he responded, his kiss gentle and reverent. When they pulled apart, snowflakes had begun to fall, catching in Abigail's hair and eyelashes. Russell brushed them away tenderly. "We should head back," he said reluctantly. "Storm's coming." The return journey was quieter, both lost in thought but acutely aware of each other. Their shoulders touched as the sleigh glided over the snow, and occasionally their gloved hands brushed, sending tingles of awareness through Abigail despite the layers between them. As they approached the ranch, Russell broke the comfortable silence. "Abigail, I need to say something." She turned to him, suddenly anxious. "Yes. I know you came here to be Silverdale's schoolteacher. I know you have plans and ambitions. I wouldn't want to stand in the way of those." "What are you saying, Russ?" He guided the horse into the barn before answering. Once they were inside, sheltered from the falling snow, he turned to her. "I'm saying that I care for you, more than I expected to, more than might be wise, given that you'll be leaving as soon as the pass clears." Abigail's heart soared at his admission. "And if I were to stay?" Hope flared in Russell's eyes. "Stay here?" "Not here at the ranch necessarily," she clarified quickly. "But in the area. I could still teach in Silverdale, but perhaps visit on weekends." Russell took her hands in his. "Is that what you want?" Abigail considered carefully before answering. She had always prided herself on her practicality, on not being swayed by romantic notions. But in the weeks she had spent at Elkhorn Ranch, something had changed. She had changed. "I want to teach," she said finally. "It's what I trained for, what I believe I'm meant to do, but I also want." She hesitated, then finished honestly, "I want to see where this leads, Russ. You and me." Relief and joy transformed his face. "That's all I'm asking for, a chance." As they unhitched the horse and put away the sleigh, a companionable atmosphere settled between them, punctuated by shy smiles and lingering glances. They had taken a step forward, acknowledged feelings that had been growing since that fateful night on the road to Silverdale. When they returned to the house, Martha took one look at their glowing faces and smiled knowingly, but said nothing. The three of them spent the rest of Christmas Day in contented companionship, playing cards, singing carols, and enjoying leftovers from the previous night's feast. As January arrived, the rhythm of life at Elkhorn Ranch continued. Russell went about his daily work, tending to the cattle and horses, repairing equipment, and managing the ranch hands. Abigail helped Martha with household tasks and began planning lessons for when she finally reached Silverdale. The snow in the pass began to melt, but then another storm would come through, keeping the road impassable. Russell didn't seem terribly disappointed by these delays, and truth be told, neither was Abigail. Their relationship deepened as they spent evenings talking by the fire, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Russell spoke of his hopes to expand the ranch, to breed horses as well as cattle. Abigail described her vision for education, her desire to reach children who might otherwise be overlooked. One evening, as they sat side by side on the settle, Russell's arm draped casually across Abigail's shoulders. He asked, "Have you ever thought about having a family of your own someday?" The question surprised her, though perhaps it shouldn't have given the direction their relationship was taking. "Yes, I have," she admitted. "Though I always assumed I would have to choose between teaching and marriage. Few schools will employ a married woman." "That seems unfair," Russell frowned. "Why should marriage make you any less capable of teaching?" "It's not about capability," Abigail explained. "It's about propriety and the assumption that a married woman's place is in the home, caring for her husband and children. And what do you think about that assumption?" Abigail considered carefully. "I think a woman should be able to be both a wife and whatever else she aspires to be, if she has the support of her husband and the determination to manage both." Russell nodded slowly. "I agree. A partnership should be just that, each person supporting the other's dreams, not just one sacrificing for the other." His progressive views surprised and delighted Abigail. In her experience, most men, even educated ones, held traditional views about a woman's role. Yet here was Russell, a rancher from the frontier, expressing ideas that aligned so perfectly with her own. "You are a remarkable man, Russell Reid," she told him softly. He smiled, a hint of self-consciousness in his expression. "Not remarkable, just practical. Seems foolish to waste talent and passion, whether it comes from a man or a woman." In that moment, Abigail knew she was falling in love with him. It wasn't just his handsome face or his kindness, but his mind, his willingness to see her as an equal, to value her ambitions as much as his own. As January gave way to February, the weather began to moderate. The snow in the pass started melting in earnest, and Russell reported that the stagecoach had made it through to the next town over. "The road to Silverdale should be clear by next week," he told Abigail one morning at breakfast, his tone carefully neutral. Martha looked between them, concern evident in her eyes. "Well, we'll certainly miss you around here, Abigail. You've brightened the place up something wonderful." "I'll miss you both too," Abigail replied. "More than I can say." Later that day, as Abigail helped Russell groom his horse in the barn, he brought up the subject again. "Silverdale's only 10 miles away," he said, working a brush over the animal's glossy coat. "Close enough to visit regularly." "Yes," Abigail agreed, handing him a cloth for the saddle. "And I meant what I said before. I want to see where this leads, Russ." He set down the brush and turned to face her. "I've been thinking about that, about us." Something in his tone made Abigail's heart beat faster. "Oh, I know it's fast. We've only known each other a couple of months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He took her hands in his. "I love you, Abigail. I think I started falling for you that first night when you looked up at me from the snow with those determined eyes, half frozen but still fighting." Tears welled up in Abigail's eyes. "I love you too, Russ. I wasn't looking for this when I came west, but I can't imagine my life without you in it now." He pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, Russell rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. Abigail pulled back slightly to see his face. "What? Marry me," he repeated, more confidently this time. "Be my wife. We can figure everything else out, your teaching, the ranch, all of it, together." For a moment, Abigail was speechless. Then practical considerations rushed in. "But Russ, what about Silverdale? They're expecting me. I signed a contract." "I spoke with Mayor Thompson when I was in town yesterday," Russell admitted. "Told him there might be a change of plans. He said they'd understand if you chose to stay at Elkhorn instead." "You spoke to the mayor about us?" Abigail was astonished. Russell looked slightly abashed. "I wanted to know where we stood before asking you. I wouldn't want you to have to choose between me and your career." "And what did he say exactly?" "He said the town would be disappointed to lose you as their schoolteacher, but—" Russell hesitated, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "But what?" Abigail pressed. "But that they might be interested in building a new schoolhouse closer to Elkhorn. Seems there are several families with school-age children in this part of the county who find Silverdale too far to travel daily." Abigail's eyes widened. "A new school? Here?" Russell nodded. "It's just an idea at this point. Would take time and money to build. But Mayor Thompson thought you might be the right person to establish it, especially if you were connected to the area through marriage." Hope bloomed in Abigail's chest. "So I could still teach." "You could still teach," Russell confirmed, "and we could be together, if that's what you want." Abigail threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she whispered against his ear. "Yes to all of it, to marriage, to teaching, to building a life here with you." Russell lifted her off her feet and spun her around, his laughter echoing in the rafters of the barn. When he set her down, his expression was serious despite his smile. "I don't have much to offer you in the way of luxury, Abigail. The ranch makes a profit, but it's a modest living, and the work never ends." "I don't need luxury," she assured him. "I need purpose and love. You've given me both." The news of their engagement delighted Martha, who immediately began planning a celebration. Word spread quickly among the ranch hands, and that evening they gathered in the main house for an impromptu party. Someone produced a fiddle, another a harmonica, and soon music filled the rooms. Russell pulled Abigail into a dance, his movements surprisingly graceful for a man who spent most of his time on horseback or working with cattle. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked as he guided her through a lively reel. "My mother insisted all her children learn proper manners, even after my father died. Said being poor was no excuse for being uncultured." His eyes twinkled with the memory. "My sister and I would practice in our tiny parlor, bumping into the furniture and driving our mother to distraction." Abigail laughed, imagining a young Russell reluctantly learning to dance under his mother's watchful eye. "I'd like to meet your family someday." "You will," he promised. "I'll write to them tomorrow about the wedding. Perhaps they can make the journey for the ceremony." The mention of a wedding brought a flush to Abigail's cheeks. "When were you thinking?" "Spring," Russell suggested. "When the wildflowers bloom in the meadows, or is that too soon?" Not too soon, Abigail decided. Spring would be perfect. As February turned to March, preparations for both the wedding and the new school began in earnest. Russell rode to Silverdale several times to meet with the town council about the schoolhouse plans. Abigail accompanied him on one such trip, finally reaching the destination she had set out for months earlier under very different circumstances. Silverdale was a small but bustling town with a main street lined with businesses: a general store, a bank, a hotel, a saloon, and various other establishments. The existing school was a one-room building at the edge of town, currently being used as a meeting hall in the absence of a teacher. Mayor Thompson, a portly man with an impressive mustache, greeted them warmly. "Miss Frost, a pleasure to finally meet you, though I understand congratulations are in order. Soon to be Mrs. Reed, I hear." Abigail smiled, still getting used to the idea herself. "Yes, thank you. And thank you for your flexibility regarding my teaching position." "Nonsense." The mayor waved away her thanks. "Reed here has convinced us that a school near Elkhorn would serve the community better in the long run. Several families have settled in that area in recent years. Their children have had no formal education to speak of." Over lunch at the hotel, they discussed plans for the new school. It would be built on the border of Elkhorn Ranch, on land Russell was donating for the purpose. The town would provide funds for construction and supplies, and families would contribute labor. "We could be ready to open by autumn," Mayor Thompson estimated, "just in time for the new school year." As they left Silverdale that afternoon, Abigail felt a sense of purpose and excitement. She had come west seeking independence and a chance to make a difference through teaching. She had found that and more: love, a home, a community that valued her skills. "Happy?" Russell asked as they rode side by side toward Elkhorn. "Very," Abigail assured him, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "Though I can't help thinking about how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't found me that night." Russell's expression grew serious. "I don't like to think about that. Providence brought us together, Abigail. I choose to be grateful rather than dwell on what might have been." His words resonated with Abigail. Throughout her life, she had often focused on what she lacked rather than what she had. Her father's death when she was 16 had left her and her mother in difficult circumstances. After her mother passed away 2 years later, Abigail had supported herself through teaching and governessing, always feeling somewhat alone in the world. Now, riding beside the man she loved toward the home they would share, she felt a profound sense of belonging. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. Spring arrived earlier at Elkhorn than Abigail had expected. By early April, the snow had mostly melted, revealing tender green shoots pushing up through the soil. Wild crocuses appeared in sheltered spots, their purple and yellow blooms like tiny flags announcing winter's defeat. Russell's mother and sister arrived 2 weeks before the wedding. Eleanor Reed was a dignified woman in her 60s with silver hair and Russell's dark eyes. His sister, Rachel, was a lively woman of 25 with a ready laugh and obvious affection for her brother. "So you're the woman who finally captured Russ's heart," Rachel said when they were introduced. "I was beginning to think he'd marry this ranch instead of a person." "Rachel," her mother admonished, though her eyes twinkled with amusement, "you'll embarrass your brother." But Russell seemed immune to embarrassment, his arm draped proudly around Abigail's shoulders. "Can you blame me for being particular? Had to wait for someone special." The Reed women integrated seamlessly into life at Elkhorn. Eleanor helped Martha with the wedding preparations, while Rachel assisted with the final touches on Abigail's wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory satin with lace trim that had been ordered from Denver. The day before the wedding, As Abigail was trying on her dress for final adjustments, Alina entered the bedroom with a small wooden box. "I brought something for you, dear," she said, opening the box to reveal a delicate pearl necklace. "These were my mother's and her mother's before that. I wore them at my wedding, and I'd like you to wear them at yours." Tears sprang to Abigail's eyes as Alina fastened the necklace around her throat. "They're beautiful. Thank you for sharing such a precious heirloom with me." Alina patted her cheek affectionately. "Your family now, Abigail. Or you will be tomorrow. Russell has chosen well. I can see how much you love each other." The wedding day dawned clear and warm, as if nature itself approved of the union. Wildflowers had been gathered from the meadows to decorate the house, and the arch Russell had built in the garden, under which they would exchange their vows. Guests began arriving mid-morning, neighboring ranchers and their families, townspeople from Silverdale, and the ranch hands in their Sunday best. The ceremony was to be performed by Reverend Mitchell, who had ridden out from Silverdale for the occasion. As Abigail prepared in her room with the help of Martha and Rachel, she felt surprisingly calm. There were no last-minute nerves, no doubts. When Martha placed a crown of white wildflowers on her head, Abigail looked in the mirror and barely recognized the radiant woman reflected there. "You look beautiful," Rachel said softly, "like a spring goddess." A knock at the door announced Alina. "It's time, dear." With Martha and Rachel preceding her, Abigail descended the stairs to where Russell's mother waited to escort her to the garden. As they stepped outside, Abigail saw the gathered guests turn to watch her approach. At the end of the makeshift aisle, beneath the flower-covered arch, stood Russell. He was dressed in a new suit, his hair neatly combed, his beard trimmed. But it was his expression that captured Abigail's heart, a look of such tender joy that it brought tears to her eyes. As she reached him, he took her hands in his. "You are the most beautiful sight I have ever seen," he whispered. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to support each other's dreams, to face life's challenges together, to build a home and a future based on love and mutual respect. When Reverend Mitchell pronounced them husband and wife, Russell kissed Abigail with a reverence that made her heart swell. The guests erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food and drink. Music played, people danced, and toasts were offered to the happy couple. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Russell led Abigail away from the festivities to a quiet spot overlooking the ranch. "Happy, Mrs. Reed?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Abigail leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid strength of him. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "I have something for you," Russell said, reaching into his pocket. He placed a small leather pouch in her hand. Inside, Abigail found a key. "What's this?" "The key to our new home," Russell explained. "I've been building it on the north side of the property, where that stand of aspens is. It's not quite finished, but it will be by the time we return from our trip to Denver." Abigail turned in his arms, astonished. "A new house? When did you find time?" "I've been working on it since February with help from the hands when they could be spared. Wanted it to be a surprise." "But where will Martha and your mother stay?" Russell smiled. "They'll remain in the main house. Mother has decided to stay on permanently. She's taken a shine to Colorado. And Martha's been running that household for years. They'll manage fine without us." The thoughtfulness of his gift overwhelmed Abigail. A home of their own, near enough to the ranch operations but private. A place to start their married life, to perhaps raise a family someday. "Thank you," she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "I can't wait to see it." As darkness fell, The newlyweds bid farewell to their guests and departed for the hotel in Silverdale, the first stop on their wedding trip to Denver. As their carriage pulled away from Elkhorn, Abigail looked back at the ranch house glowing with lantern light, at the people waving from the yard. "We'll be back soon," Russell assured her, noting her wistful expression. Abigail squeezed his hand. "I know. It's just strange to think that everything has changed since that snowy night when you found me on the road. If I hadn't missed the stagecoach, if my belongings hadn't been stolen, if I hadn't decided to ride into town that evening instead of waiting until morning," Russell added. "So many little choices that led us here." Abigail rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think life was something you planned meticulously. Now I understand there's room for the unexpected, for fate or providence or whatever you want to call it." Russell pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm just grateful it brought you to me, even if you were shivering in a dress too thin for winter." Abigail laughed softly. "And you wrapped your blanket around me. Best decision I ever made," Russell murmured against her hair. "Though asking you to marry me was a close second." As the carriage carried them toward Silverdale and the beginning of their honeymoon, Abigail felt a profound sense of rightness. The journey that had begun in fear and cold had led to warmth, love, and a future brighter than she had dared to dream. Their wedding trip to Denver was a whirlwind of new experiences. Neither had visited the rapidly growing city before, and they explored it together with equal parts excitement and wonder. They attended the theater, dined in fine restaurants, and purchased furnishings for their new home. When they returned to Elkhorn 2 weeks later, Russell insisted on carrying Abigail across the threshold of their new house. It was a charming 2-story structure built of solid logs with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Inside, the rooms were spacious and filled with light from large windows. "Russ, it's beautiful," Abigail marveled as he showed her through the house. "I can't believe you did all this in secret." "I had help," he admitted, "and I wanted our first home together to be special." The house boasted a parlor, a dining room, a kitchen, and a study on the first floor. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms and a smaller room that Russell had outfitted as a private library for Abigail, complete with built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking the mountains. "For when you need a quiet place to prepare your lessons or just to read," he explained. Tears welled in Abigail's eyes at his thoughtfulness. "It's perfect. Everything is perfect." Life settled into a new rhythm for the newlyweds. Russell continued managing the ranch, while Abigail divided her time between helping with ranch duties and preparing for the opening of the new school. Construction had begun in earnest, with many in the community pitching in to help. By August, the schoolhouse was completed, a sturdy 1-room building with large windows, new desks, a teacher's desk, and a small bell tower. Books and supplies arrived from Denver, ordered with funds provided by the town council. On the first day of September 1869, Abigail Reed stood at the door of her new school, welcoming 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 16. Some were children of neighboring ranchers, others from families who lived in the scattered homesteads between Elkhorn and Silverdale. As she rang the bell to call them inside for the first time, Abigail felt a surge of purpose and pride. This was what she had come west to do, to teach, to make a difference in young lives. The fact that she could do so while married to the man she loved made it all the sweeter. Russell watched from a distance, not wanting to intrude on her moment but unable to stay away entirely. When the last child had filed inside, Abigail looked up and saw him. She smiled and waved before following her students into the schoolhouse. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Russell asked, "How was your first day as Elkhorn's schoolmarm?" "Wonderful," Abigail replied, her eyes shining with satisfaction. "The children are eager to learn, even the older ones who haven't had much formal schooling before. And it felt right, Russ. Like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." He squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you. Not many women would have the courage to forge this kind of life teaching, running a household, being a rancher's wife. Not many women have husbands who support them the way you support me," Abigail countered. "You make it possible, Russ. Your understanding, your willingness to see me as a partner rather than just a wife." As autumn progressed, Abigail settled into her dual roles with increasing confidence. The school thrived under her guidance, and word of her innovative teaching methods spread throughout the county. By October, 3 more families had enrolled their children, necessitating the construction of additional desks. At home, she and Russell established traditions and routines that suited them both. They took turns cooking dinner, shared household tasks, and spent evenings reading aloud to each other or playing chess by the fire. On weekends, they often rode out together to check on distant parts of the ranch, or simply to enjoy the spectacular landscape that was now their shared home. In late November, as they prepared for their first Thanksgiving as a married couple, Abigail received news that would change their lives once again. "Russ," she said one evening as they sat by the fire, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from the ranch ledger he was reviewing, noting the mix of nervousness and joy in her expression. "What is it?" "I'm going to have a baby. Dr. Sanders confirmed it yesterday when I was in town." For a moment, Russell was silent, processing the news. Then a slow smile spread across his face. He set aside the ledger and moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "When?" "Late May, the doctor thinks." Russell placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Are you happy about this? I know we hadn't planned to start a family so soon." Abigail covered his hand with hers. "I am happy. A little nervous, of course, but yes, very happy." "Are you?" In answer, Russell gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of precious glass. "I have never been happier in my life," he whispered against her hair. "Thank you for this gift, Abigail, for everything you've brought into my life." They shared the news with family and friends at Thanksgiving dinner, hosted in the main house with Alina and Martha. The announcement was met with joy and excited preparations for the baby's arrival. As winter settled over Elkhorn, Abigail continued teaching, though she and Russell had agreed she would take a break once the baby was born. The school board had already begun looking for a temporary replacement teacher to finish out the term. "Just until autumn," Abigail insisted. "Then I want to return if you're still agreeable." "Of course," Russell assured her. "Whatever you decide is fine with me. The baby and I will manage while you're teaching." His easy acceptance of arrangements that many men would find objectionable only deepened Abigail's love for him. In a time when most wives were expected to give up any profession upon marriage, let alone upon becoming mothers, Russell's support was a rare and precious thing. Spring came to Colorado once again, bringing with it wildflowers, green grass, and the first anniversary of their wedding. Abigail, now in her 8th month of pregnancy, had reluctantly stepped back from teaching in April. The temporary teacher, a young woman named Miss Collins, had taken over the school until the fall term. On a warm evening in mid-May, as Abigail and Russell sat on their porch watching the sunset, she felt the first contraction. "Russ," she said calmly, "I think it's time to send for the midwife." The next 12 hours were a blur of pain, determination, and finally, profound joy. With Martha and the midwife attending her, and Russell pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door, Abigail gave birth to a healthy baby boy just as dawn was breaking over the eastern hills. When Russell was finally allowed into the room, he approached the bed with reverence. Abigail, exhausted but radiant, held out their son to him. "Meet your son," she said softly. Russell took the tiny bundle carefully, staring in wonder at the perfect little face. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, they were the same deep brown as his father's. "He's perfect," Russell whispered. "You're perfect. I love you both so much." Abigail smiled, watching the tender way Russell held their child. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, wanting to wait until they met their baby. Russell considered the tiny person in his arms. "What about James? After your father?" Tears welled in Abigail's eyes at the suggestion. Despite her father's flaws, there had been good times too, moments of tenderness and love that she cherished in her memories. "James Russell Reid," she said, testing the name. "It sounds right." "James Russell Reid it is," Russell agreed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. He placed the baby in Abigail's arms, then wrapped his arm around her shoulders, creating a circle of family. As they sat together in the golden light of early morning, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the terrifying night when she had nearly frozen to death on a Colorado road to this perfect morning as a wife and mother, her life had transformed in ways she could never have anticipated. "Happy?" Russell asked softly, echoing the question he had asked her many times over the past year and a half. Abigail looked from their son's peaceful face to her husband's loving eyes. "Completely," she answered, and knew it was the simple truth. The years that followed brought changes and challenges, but the foundation of love and mutual respect that Russell and Abigail had built remained steadfast. Their family grew with the addition of a daughter, Eleanor Martha Reid, born 2 years after James. The school continued to thrive under Abigail's leadership, expanding to 2 rooms as more families settled in the area. Russell's ranch prospered as well. His breeding program produced horses sought after throughout the territory, and the cattle operation grew to be one of the largest in the county. Eleanor Reid remained at Elkhorn, helping to raise her grandchildren and becoming a beloved figure in the community. On cool autumn evenings, Russell and Abigail still sat on their porch, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. Sometimes they would reminisce about their first meeting, she shivering in a dress too thin for winter, he wrapping his blanket around her. That simple act of kindness had been the beginning of a love story neither had expected but both treasured beyond measure. And on particularly cold nights, when the winter wind howled around the corners of their sturdy home, they would huddle together beneath a quilt that Martha had made from that very same blanket, grateful for the warmth they had found in each other's arms.